Very good morning, dear students. Welcome back once again for the students of class 10 A, B, and C. And the subject that I'm doing today is geography. And the chapter that I'm covering is chapter 8, food crops. So let's get started, dear students. Now we know that our country is very big in its size, and because of its huge size, what happens is we experience different climatic condition. We also have different types of soil that is found in our country because of its huge size. So because of the huge area that our country has, we have both crops ranging from both tropical and temperate type of crops are found. Crops which are grown in the warmer region and crops which are grown in the slightly cooler region. Now crops can be generally categorized into two types. One we have is the food crops, and the second one we have is the cash crops. Now let's see which crops come under the category of food crops, which we consume, which is very essential for us. The first one we have is cereals. Now what is cereals, or what are the crops that come under the category of cereals? Cereals are basically the crops which come under the category of cereals are basically rice, wheat, maize, and millets. Then we have the second one, that is pulses, which is also very equally important. We have moong, gram, masoor, different types of dal that we have. And then we have the third one, that is spices, which basically comprise of cardamom, ginger, and pepper. So these are the different types of food crops. Now we also have what we say is the second one, that is cash crops, the crops which are mainly sold in the market for earning profit on commercial basis. So which are the different types of cash crops that we have? The first one is oil seeds. Now we have different types of oil seeds like mustard, groundnut, sesame, coconut, castor. These are the different types of oil that we get. These are the different types of oil seed that we have. The second one is fiber, that we have cotton and jute. Then we have the third one, that is plantation crops like tea, coffee, rubber, which are grown on huge plantations, and all these crops are mainly sold for to gain maximum profit, for commercial purposes, to get maximum profit. Then we have the last one, that is other crops, which include sugarcane. So all these, that is oil seeds, fiber crops, plantation crops, and the other types of crops like sugarcane come under the category of cash crops. Now let's go to the first one. Let's see one by one, that is the food crops. Now the term, if you see cereals, now what are cereals? I just told you some of the examples of cereals like rice, wheat, maize, and millets. Now what is cereals? The term cereal is basically used for all kinds of grass-like plants having starchy edible seeds. That means those plants which have edible seeds and which can be consumed are called as cereals. They have high nutritional value and are the basic diet of all the people. If you see in our country also, majority of the people in our country consume rice. Okay, so these cereals, besides rice also, if you see wheat, maize, millets, they are the basic diet of all the people around the world. Example, rice, wheat, maize, and millets. Now let's go to the first one, that is rice. Now rice is the most important food crop and is the staple food of millions of people. It is a tropical as well as a subtropical crop grown in different areas of our country, from the hilly terrace of Kashmir in northern India to the lowland areas of Kerala in southern India. That means in India, majority of the people in our country consume rice. We are basically a population which eats rice, and is grown from the northern part to the southern part. That means from Kashmir it goes right down to Kerala. The entire region covered mostly in our country practices rice cultivation. Now let's see the types of rice that are grown. Now basically there are two types of rice that are grown in our country. One we have is the upland rice, and the other one is the lowland rice. Now which are the types of rice, or what rice grows in the upper region, or what do we mean by upland rice? Now upland rice are basically rice which are grown in the higher regions like the mountain slopes and the hills. That is why they're termed as upland rice. Moreover, artificial irrigation is not possible in these areas. It is sown in March and April, just before the monsoon season, and then harvested in September or October and used mainly for local consumption. That means the crops that are grown, the rice that is grown in the upper regions like the mountains, area slopes, and the hills, are mainly grown for local consumption, not for selling in the market. The second type of rice that grows is called as the lowland rice. Now it's mainly grown in the river valleys and deltas, in the lower plains. It requires a lot of irrigation. As we know that in our country we have rainfall only from June, July, August and September. Then remaining months is practically more or less very dry or have very experience very less rainfall. So therefore, in this type of rice that is grown in the lowland areas, in the areas of the river valleys and deltas and lower lands, what happens is plenty of irrigation is required. It is sown in June and harvested in October and November. Now most of the rice grown in India is of this type, that is the lowland rice. Now let's go to the climatic condition. Now what are the temperature, soil, rainfall required for rice cultivation? The first one we have is the temperature. Now we know that rice requires a very sunny weather. A bright sunshine with average temperature of around 24 degrees centigrade is very ideal for its cultivation. Now during growing it requires a temperature about 16 to 20 degrees centigrade, and during ripening around 18 to 32 degrees centigrade. That is the temperature required for the cultivation of rice. Now if you see rainfall, it requires around 150 to 300 centimeters of rainfall. It is a crop which requires high amount of rainfall. The fields need to be flooded in the initial stage of the growth of rice. Therefore, the rainfall that is required by rice cultivation is around 150 to 300 centimeters of rainfall. The soil required for rice, alluvial topsoil with a clay impervious soil. See, alluvial soil with a clay impervious soil, subsoil. That means the soil that is at the bottom, the lower layer, should be an impervious soil. That means it should not allow water to sink underneath. Otherwise, the fields will not be flooded. That is why it's so very important for the fields to be flooded in the initial growth of the paddy plants, rice. So therefore, what happens is it requires an alluvial topsoil with a clay impervious subsoil. Methods of cultivation. How is rice cultivated in our country? We have different types of methods. The first one we have is broadcasting method. Now in this broadcasting method, after we plow the fields, what happens is seeds are just sprinkled randomly. That is called as the broadcasting method. When the seeds are just sprinkled randomly by hand on the plowed field, it is called as the broadcasting method. Then we have the second one, that is the dibbling method. Now in the dibbling method, what happens is the seeds are dropped at regular intervals in the plowed furrow after the field has been plowed. The areas where the field has been plowed, at regular intervals the seeds are dropped in a straight line. That is the dibbling method. Dropping seeds at regular intervals in the plowed field or furrows. Then we have the third one, that is drilling method. Now in the drilling method, it's more or less same, but then what happens, the seeds are dropped through a bamboo shaft attached to the plow in the furrow. So in the drilling method, the seeds are dropped through a bamboo shaft that is attached to the plow in the furrow. Now this checks wastage of seeds, but it requires a lot of time and labor. See? It does check wastage of seeds, but then it's very time consuming. It requires a lot of labor. Okay, so for the quick germination, seeds are soaked in water for a few hours before sowing, especially when the soil is not moist enough. So for quick germination, the seeds are first soaked in the water and then planted in the fields, especially when the soils are very dry, when it's not moist. At that time, this plays a very important role for the quick germination of seeds. Otherwise, basically, if you see, because of the monsoon season in our country, plenty of water supplied by the irrigation methods, what happens is the fields are flooded. So it is done in that manner, not causing much difficulties. So that is the method of cultivation of rice. Now let's go to the next one, that is number 4. We have done point number 3. The fourth one we have is the transplantation method. Now this transplantation method is a very effective method. Here what happens is the crops increase tremendously. Now how it's done? In this method, seeds are first sown in the nursery beds. Okay, in the very initial stage, they are sown in the nurseries. Then after 4 to 5 weeks, when the seeds are almost 12, 15 to 20 centimeters tall, after 4 to 5 weeks, when the seeds grow to a height of almost 15 to 20 centimeters tall, they are uprooted from the nurseries and then transplanted in the flooded fields. After some time, the field is then drained so that when the crop is ready for harvest, see, the crops are ready, the fields are drained when the crop is ready for harvest. So that is very, very important. So in the initial stage, a lot of rainfall is required, but then afterwards, when it grows, see, then the fields are left dry. So by the time the harvesting season comes, the field is practically very dry, and then it's very easy, not causing any much difficulties for the farmers and not spoiling the crop as well. So after some time, the field is drained so that when the crop is ready, the field is dry as well. Though this is labor intensive, the yield increases significantly. So transplantation method is one of the most successful method of growing a good yield, but then it is very labor intensive and time consuming as well. Then we have the fifth one, that is Japanese method. Slightly more or less the same, but slight difference here. Okay, let's see here. In this method, the farmers use high yielding seeds, that is Japonica. This is the seed that they have introduced, Japonica, which they have used. Seeds are sown in the nurseries or nursery beds and then transplanted in the fields. High manure and regular irrigation ensures 3 times higher yield. So this is a advantage. This is a plus point to this crop here. High manure and regular irrigation has ensured 3 times higher yield of this type of crop. So that has become proven to be very, very successful. Transplantation method, the Japanese method, are very, very successful. Then let's go to the next one, that is harvesting. When do we harvest the crop? Harvesting is done by hands with sits and allowed to dry for 3 to 4 days. So by the time the field is dry, then they are cut down and then they are allowed to dry for 3 to 4 days. It is then threshed by beating the paddy against a wooden bar or making the bullocks trample the paddy under their feet to remove seeds from the stalk. So after the plant has been cut down, is made to dry for 3 to 4 days, then tied in bundles and then beaten against a wooden bar. That is one way to remove the seeds from the stalk. Then other way is also to make the bullocks trample the paddy under the feet so that the seeds can be removed from the stalk. This is the second way also where the seeds are removed from the stalk. Then after they are removed, then they are cleaned, and then what happens? They are taken to the mill. So after threshing, the grains are taken to the mills to remove the yellowish husk from the grain. The main reason why we take it to the mills is to remove that yellowish cover, or husk from the grain, which also polishes the rice afterwards. So polishing of grains make the rice very attractive, but then what happens is most of the nutrition is lost in this process. Besides remove the grain, see the main reason why we take the seeds to the mills is to remove the yellowish husk from the grain. But besides that, what happens is the nutrition, a lot of nutrition is also lost in this process. And then afterwards, then what happens? Then the rice is ready to be consumed after the husk has been removed from the seeds. Now let's go a little bit further and see the regions where rice is grown, distribution of rice. Now India contributes about 22% of rice production in the world. It is grown on the river valleys, deltas, low-lying coastal areas and in the slopes as well. Almost all rice grown in our country is produced from states like West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Punjab, Bihar and Tamil Nadu. So these are the main states which contribute to the maximum growth of rice cultivation in our country. West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, then Punjab, Tamil Nadu and Bihar. So these are the areas where rice is grown. You can just see in the map as well. See the cultivation of rice. See, it's done in the states like I told you, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, see, then Andhra Pradesh, then Punjab, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu. These are the areas where rice is extensively grown in our country. Now we would move to the next one, that is the cultivation of wheat, which is also called as the rabi crop because it's grown during the winter season. Now wheat is the second most important food crop grown in the country after rice, both in area and production. About 14% of the total cropped area in the country is under wheat cultivation. If you see the total area that has been put under cultivation, growing different crops, wheat occupies 14% of the area that is used for cultivation in our country. Okay, wheat cultivation basically comprises about 37.6% of total production in our country. If you see how much wheat is produced in our country among the crops, 37.6% of the total production of wheat takes place in our country, with 12% of the world production. If you see in the world how much wheat is produced by India, it comes to about 12%. But in India, if you see how much wheat is produced, grown in our country, it is about 37.6%. It forms the staple food of the people of northern and northwestern parts of our country. See, I told you, see, rice, if you see, is consumed mostly by the entire people of our country, population of our country. But then wheat is also very, very important diet for our people. Though we consume also, though it's not that the other regions, people of the other regions don't consume rice in our country. The northern, southern, eastern do consume wheat. But then majority of the people who consume wheat as a staple diet is mainly found in the regions like northern and northwestern part of our country, where they consume a lot of wheat. It is a temperate crop grown in winter from October and November and then harvested in March to April. So it is basically a winter crop. It's grown in slightly after the monsoon season, when the soil is moist, and then slowly as the temperature also is slightly lower. Now types of wheat that is grown in our country. Now we have different types of wheat that are grown. The first one, on the basis of the geographical variation, the first one we have is the spring wheat. It is also called as Tritium vulgaris. It is a softer variety of wheat suitable for bread and grown on irrigated lands where the soil is friable, loamy and clay in nature. Friable means basically which breaks down very easily, where the soil breaks down very easily. Loamy soil which breaks down very easily, and clay in nature. It is grown mostly in Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand. So this is the type of wheat, the spring wheat, which is grown in the different states like Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand. The second type of wheat that we have is the winter wheat. Now, it's also called as Tritium durum. It's a harder variety of wheat used for making macaroni and is grown in the southern part of our country, in southern India, South India, see, and it's mainly grown in the black clay soil where their rainfall is quite high as well. So it's grown in South India in black clay soil with heavy rainfall. It is grown in states like Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra and Western Andhra Pradesh. So these are the two types of wheat, the spring wheat, which is called as Tritium vulgaris, and the winter wheat, which is called as Tritium durum. So we have just seen a little bit about the two types of wheat. Now let's go to the climatic condition. How much temperature, rainfall is required by wheat. Now if you see temperature, wheat requires a cooler climate compared to rice. See, cooler climate with moderate rainfall. Not very high rainfall, moderate rainfall. Ideal temperature in the growing time is ranges from 10 degrees centigrade to 15 degrees centigrade, which is suitable in the sowing season, and then 20 to 25 degrees centigrade during harvesting. That means the ideal temperature required ranges from 10 to 15 degrees centigrade for in the sowing season, and 20 to 25 degrees centigrade during the harvesting season. So basically, I told you winter is a rabi crop grown in the winter time, where the rainfall is slightly lesser, the temperature is also slightly lower. Now rainfall that is required. Wheat generally requires a moderate rainfall between 50 to 100 centimeters. See, wheat requires a moderate rainfall with 50 to 100 centimeters annually, very less compared to rice. Wheat requires a cool and wet growing season but warm and dry harvesting season. That means growing time the temperature should be slightly less, but during harvesting, see, during harvesting it should be slightly warmer and drier as well. So that is the rainfall and the temperature that is required for wheat cultivation. Let us see the soil. Wheat grows best in well-drained loamy and clayey loam. The alluvial soil of Gangetic Plain and black soil of Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh are good for wheat. So it requires a very good loamy and clay soil. And the soil that has favored this growth are the soil that is found in the Gangetic Plains, the alluvial soil, and the black soil that is found in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. Methods of cultivation. If you see the methods of cultivation, wheat is sown in October and November. I told you just after the monsoon season, after the rainy season, when the soil is moist and can be easily plowed. Seeds can be sown by drilling or the broadcasting method. See, that means drilling means dropping seeds at regular intervals through a bamboo shaft, or also the dibbling method, or the broadcasting method, where the seeds are just sprinkled randomly by hand over the field. So that's how the seeds are sown in the field. The temperature should be generally low during the growing season, and the winter rain helps in its growth. The plant needs around 3 to 4 times of irrigated water, or the plant needs 3-4 times irrigation during the growing period. So a lot of irrigation is required by the plant, because mainly is because of the growing season that takes place in the winter months, where the rainfall is very less. So that is why a lot of irrigation is required. A lot of water is required in the field as well. Now let's go to the harvesting. When is the crop harvested? Wheat starts to ripen in the month of March and is harvested in the month of April. It is harvested with the help of sickle. However, nowadays machines have replaced it in states like Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Punjab. So these are the areas where the wheat is grown extensively. They are grown on large scale. Extensive cultivation takes place. And therefore what happens now? Machines have to be used. Human laborers cannot go and then start harvesting the crop, cutting the crops down. It will take ages. But if you are just growing it for your local consumption, for your own home, or for yourself, then yes, human labor does take place, where human beings, the farmers themselves can go and cut the crop and then use it for their consumption. But in the crops, when the crops are grown for extensive purpose, for selling in the market on large scale, like the crops that are grown in Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, and so on, they are grown on large scales. So machines are used in place of human beings so that the work can be done faster and better. The traditional method of threshing to get the crop trampled under the bullock feet is used to separate the grains from the husk. So here also the traditional method is used to basically separate the seeds from the husk. Nowadays the work is done by threshers, as the traditional method is time consuming. Same thing, see, again, like if you have to engage people to do the harvesting, it will take ages. Threshing also same thing. If you have to make bullocks do it, it will take time, a lot of time. Therefore nowadays what happens? Machines are used. Threshers are used. Nowadays the work is done by threshers, as the traditional method is time consuming. If you make the bullocks to walk over the plant, the wheat plant, the seeds, it takes a long time for the separation to take place. Therefore nowadays machines are used, threshers are used to get the work done faster. So the traditional method is very time consuming. No other crop has such a sharp increase in its production like wheat due to the implementation of the Green Revolution. So if you see in a country, see, our country also, if you see, prior to the Green Revolution, we had a lot of shortage of food grains. But then after the Green Revolution took place, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, the father of Green Revolution, after the Green Revolution took place in our country, then what happens is the production of crops increased tremendously, whereby our country was self-sufficient. And the crop that grew the best, that thrived the best because of this Green Revolution was the wheat. So it did really increase in its production. So no other crop has had such a sharp increase in its production like wheat due to the implementation of the Green Revolution. Now let's see the distribution of wheat. Over 87% of India's wheat production comes from 5 states. See, main production of wheat in our country comes from 5 states: Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Bihar. These are also called as the granaries of our country. Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan and Bihar, They are called the granaries of a country because of its huge production of the food crops, mainly wheat. So Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir, Uttar Pradesh, also sorry, Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir also, yes, uh, grow grow wheat. Uttar Pradesh is the leading producer of wheat in India with 94.9 million tons of production, which is the leading what say producer of wheat in our country. Now let's go to the next one, that is the map. Let's see the map first. You can just have a look at the map here of the wheat production of our country. See, Uttar Pradesh, I told you, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Bihar. See, then we also have Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir. These are the states where wheat is grown in our country. Now let's go to the third one. Or before we go to the next one, let's see the difference between the rice and wheat, the Kharif and the Rabi crop. Now rice is a Kharif crop and wheat is a Rabi crop. Rice needs average temperature between 20 to 32 degrees centigrade to grow, and wheat needs around 10 to 15 degrees centigrade to grow. So much lesser compared to rice. That's why it's grown in the winter time, wheat, and rice in the summertime. Now rice needs around 150 to 300 centimeters of rainfall, very high, which takes place in the summertime, whereas wheat requires an average rainfall about 50 to 100 centimeters. Wheat involves extensive type of farming as compared to rice, and heavy rainfall with flooded fields are required for rice cultivation. Heavy rainfall with flooded fields are required for rice cultivation, whereas wheat requires moderate rainfall. It does not require as much rainfall as rice. So this is the difference between the rice, which is a Kharif crop, and wheat, which is a Rabi crop. Now let's go to the last one. I'm omitting millets because that is not there. Okay, so we'll have to do this. That is the pulses. So we'll do this pulses. Now the next one. Pulses form a very important part of the Indian diet. Very important. They are rich in proteins and form an essential part of the vegetarian diet. Being a leguminous crop, pulses fix the atmospheric nitrogen in the soil and increase the natural fertility of the soil. That means pulses basically makes the soil rejuvenate itself, regain the fertility itself. Okay, therefore it's a leguminous crop. Hence pulses are usually rotated with other crops to maintain or restore the soil fertility. It serves as an excellent forage. Gram, ahar, urd, masoor and moong are the important pulses grown in our country. So you can just see the different types of pulses that we have in our country. Gram, ahar, urd, masoor, moong are the different types of pulses. Let's see the climatic condition of pulses. Now the temperature that's required for pulses, if you see, pulses are cultivated as Kharif crop in the north and Rabi crop in the south. So it grows best in mild, cool and comparatively dry climate with 20 to 25 degrees temperature. That means pulses thrive very well in an average temperature of 20 to 25 degrees centigrade. The rainfall that is required is more or less moderate with 50 to 100 centimeters of rainfall, and too much rainfall during sowing and flowering can damage the crops. So pulses basically require moderate rainfall, say 50 to 100 centimeters of rainfall is required, not very high rainfall. Harvesting, the crop matures in about 150 days, slightly more than 4 months. Okay. Then the crop matures in about 150 days, 50 days. When the leaves become dry and begin to shed, plants are uprooted. So when the leaves become dry and begin to shed, plants are uprooted. Plants are made to dry for a week before threshing. They are threshed by trampling under the feet of bullocks or beating with a stick. So that's how again threshing it takes place, where the seeds are removed from the stalk. Separation of seeds from this stalk is mainly done by the bullocks walking over it or trampling it under the feet of the bullock or banging it with a stick. Now regions of cultivation of pulses. Where is pulses grown in our country? India is the largest producer and consumer of pulses and account about 1/5 of the total production of pulses in the world. So India is a huge producer and consumer of pulses, and it accounts for about one-fifth of the total production of pulses in the world. Pulses occupy about 11% of the total cropped area in our country. So if you see in the total area that has been cropped in our plowed, cultivated in our country, pulses comprise about 11%. It is raised on soil ranging from light loams and alluvial soil of Great Plains to the black soil of Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra and red soil areas. So if you see here, pulses are grown in the alluvial soil, black soil, red soil, which are found in the areas like the Great Plains, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and so on. And the important states that are basically the producer of a grower of pulses are Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, then we have Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar, Punjab, Haryana, and so on. So these are the basic states which basically grow pulses. You can just see here. See, we have Punjab there, Rajasthan, see, then Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh also, Karnataka also to some extent, see, Bihar. These are the states where pulses are grown in a country. So this brings to the end of this chapter, dear students. I do hope you will take maximum benefit from this class. Please do revise the lesson properly, go through the video a couple of times, and please again do the questions for the chapter from the previous year's ICSE questions. That is, the previous year's ICSE questions which are based on this chapter also can be solved, also can be solved, also can be done by you, which will be a home assignment for all of you. So please do the 6-7 years ICSE questions from this chapter as well. So this is the end of the lesson here, dear students. I do hope you will go through the lesson and learn the lesson as well and do the assignments properly. Till then, have a safe stay, to study well, and thank you so much.